The CDC has officially recommended the Pfizer vaccine booster for select groups, including people 65 years and older, residents in long-term care settings, and people 50 to 64 years old with underlying conditions. Bureaucratic and political back and forth on the booster shot have led some fully vaccinated Americans unclear about whether they can and should get the third jab. During an appearance on Face the Nation, CDC Director Rochelle Walensky conceded that the booster rollout was indeed confusing.
But you can understand when the president stands up there and says we're probably going to open this up anyway, and you're saying wait and see, there's some confusion. Are you going to recommend boosters for the general population?
You know, I recognize that confusion. Right now, our recommendation is for these limited people in the population over 65, high-risk workers, high-risk community occupations, as well as high-risk by comorbidities. We are evaluating this science in real time.
White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki was also pressed on the mixed messaging.
Is it partly a concern that after all the back and forth on the advice and guidance from the government, people are confused about the booster and maybe even more doubtful about it?
Well, I would say the reason we did this chart is because sometimes it's self-perpetuating. If everybody here is saying it's confusing, then people are going to think it's confusing. And so what I'm trying to do is alleviate the confusion, right? And explain these are exactly the categories. Anyone who's had a Pfizer shot 6 months ago, go get another shot. If you took Moderna or J&J, they're still considering that data. Don't get the shot yet, not approved yet. So we want to do everything we can to alleviate any confusion, answer questions people have. President went and got his shot, his booster shot on camera to make clear it's safe, it's effective, it's something you should do if you're in one of these categories.
I don't know if that really dispelled any of the confusion that's out there. I mean, one of the biggest aspects of the confusion is that they have added this category of high-risk workers, and that's not what the FDA actually recommended. I watched that FDA 8-hour meeting twice, so I can tell you they did not recommend it for high-risk workers. And the only reason why they recommended it for healthcare workers was because they were unsure if the third shot would give any sort of neutralizing antibodies so the people wouldn't catch it. They were saying, well, we're not really clear, but if it does, it's better to give it to the healthcare workers because we need to keep them in the hospitals. We cannot afford to lose any of them, any of them getting sick and having to take 10 days off. So that's why they were recommending it for the hospital. But grocery store workers and teachers and all of these other professions, anybody can kind of come around and say, well, I'm high risk, right? I'm in a high risk profession, or I've got a comorbidity, and it's still very unclear.
Yeah, it reminds me of the early days of who's eligible to get vaccinated, and they were like, well, essential workers, and if you have a body mass index of a certain size, and this ends up being just like everyone, which speaks to how kind of stupid it is. Biden is right. He has their number. He said, yeah, well, it's not really a big deal if you get it, even if you're not supposed to yet, because eventually everyone's going to be able to get it, and that might be sooner rather than later. He's right. So I don't know why we wouldn't just come out and say that. Like, the CDC act like they're consulting the science. They're reading, the soothsaying stones or something, and then they'll find the truth. They're going to say you can get it eventually. You don't have to, but you can if you want. I don't know why we should just open it up to everyone in that way.
Because they don't know the safety. That's the main concern with the FDA is they just simply said, we just don't know how safe this actually is. We don't have enough data. The data they got from Israel was only for about 12 days. It was a very limited group of people. They're just, I think 300 people over the course of 12 days is what they looked at for the data. They just don't have enough of it. So they're just really unsure about the safety profile of doing a third dose.
If I was 64 years old, I would want to get the booster despite this arbitrary cutoff, right?
And probably have a comorbidity, yeah. If you're 64.
Yeah, that's why they gave it to those specific groups, but they didn't release it for everybody, very specifically.
I thought it was deeply irresponsible, just from a global citizenship perspective, the way that Pfizer went about this intense lobbying campaign to push for this third booster, because then when you see that happening, and you see the effect that they can have on the government, then for people who are already skeptical or already hesitant, they start to say, well, if they're pushing this hard for a third shot and the FDA isn't sure that everybody needs this third shot, well, then maybe I should be skeptical about the push that they've made for their other shots. And Pfizer is making billions upon billions of dollars on this, and for them to then instead of using that money to help to vaccinate the rest of the world that still has not had access to this, and instead lobby the U.S. government so that the richest country on the planet can give a third shot to the people who got Pfizer, I did think was deeply irresponsible. The FDA is still reeling from internal turmoil over the approval of booster shots. Director of the Center for Biologics Evaluation and Research, Peter Marks, will take over as acting director on Monday and will now spearhead all vaccine operations after some of those resignations. The move comes following the resignations of 2 top officials earlier this month over pressure from the White House to approve widespread distribution of the booster, and that pressure came after lobbying by Pfizer.
So I have a different perspective on this. I think they should all resign. There should be more widespread resignations from this dumpster fire of an agency that has screwed up every aspect of this pandemic. I agree with Biden. He wants, people don't have to get booster shots. They should just be allowed to if they want them. It's I believe in the choice and freedom rhetoric of it. If you want to do it, fine. I wish the government would more often talk about natural immunity. Not that that's the goal, is to get people immunized naturally, but it looks like the natural immunity is pretty robust. I don't know if you need a booster shot, even if you're in one of those older categories. If you've already had the disease, it seems kind of unlikely to me. But again, it should be your choice. And I don't know why we need to have like this ridiculously rigorous queue for, but if you're a teacher, but if you're a...
Right. Well, again, the safety profile, over and over and over in that FDA meeting, nearly every single healthcare, doctor, professional cited concerns about the heart inflammation for young men. And that was their main primary concern over and over and over again, that they were unclear if the benefits actually outweigh the risks. So I think people do need to take some caution.
Especially for young men who have recovered from COVID and had been vaccinated, right? You might be getting to a place where the booster shot doesn't make a lot of sense.
And we had a Johns Hopkins virologist on last week who said, for young men who are or young adolescent boys who are concerned about the heart inflammation, that was most associated with the second shot. So maybe those people just get the first shot. So I could see why you would have people, and this is a Johns Hopkins guy. So I could see why you would have people at that FDA meeting wondering about a third shot for those particular people if it's the second shot that has been more associated with the inflammation. They don't know what the third one's going to do.
And in other COVID news, Lauren Boebert earned some ire on Twitter for drawing equivalency between the vaccine and Tylenol, quipping, quote, "I woke up with a headache this morning. I took some Tylenol. Now if everyone else could take some Tylenol too, so mine would start working, that would be great." This is a false equivalency. This is so ridiculous. The backlash and mockery, as always, was swift. But headaches are not contagious except in like a psychosomatic way, I guess, where you say you have a headache, maybe I feel like a headache. It doesn't actually work like that.
I think she probably has Havana syndrome, and so she probably got blasted with micro radio waves or whatever that.
I chug Tylenol. I take way more Tylenol than a responsible person.
What I love is her. I love envisioning her typing this out on her phone and looking at it in the draft and thinking to herself, this is a smart point. This is clever. I'm really going to get him with this one. Bing, send.
Oh, yeah.
Nonetheless, I do think that the vaccine is more for oneself than for others. It's just like the measles vaccine or polio vaccine. I don't travel the world worried about others who may or may not have had it when I go around, especially to developing countries. But I get her point. Maybe Tylenol wasn't the best use of the point.
Because the disease is contagious. But you're right that the best way to protect yourself, get vaccinated. And then again, that's been my message all along. You're really protective if you do it. You don't have to worry so much about other people. You don't have to, be obsessed with everyone else's behavior. Tomorrow on Rising, Emily Jashinsky will be here to discuss the breaking news of the day.
Plus, senior correspondent at Insider, Matthias Schwartz, joins us to detail his reporting on the latest Hunter Biden corruption scandal. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. We will see you tomorrow.